So the Gearbox panel at PAX just wrapped up and they revealed a bunch of new info and a little bit more details on a lot of the stuff that we saw with that like 15 minutes of gameplay stuff from the other week. So we're going to be going through looking at everything new and everything that you guys need to know upcoming here with Borderlands 4. So the first 20 minutes of the show was basically just kind of talking about some Risk of Rain stuff, which is another Gearbox property. And then they kind of went over a little bit of a recap of Borderlands 3, kind of the end where Lilith is teleporting Elpis away. Things like that. They're kind of going over the Timekeeper a little bit more, how he's had control over Kairos over the last couple thousand years. He uses the bolts to kind of mind control people and things like that. And people are starting to rip him out, which is the revolt and kind of free will that we're starting to see. And it's affecting the enemies that we're going to be seeing in Borderlands 4. But this is where we get into the good stuff here, where we start talking a little bit more about our Vault Hunters that were kind of shown off. We mainly got to see Vex and Rafa in the 15 minutes trailer. We don't really know much about the other two yet, except for their names. But we're going to be going through. There's a little bit more info that they do give, especially about Vex, which is really nice. They're calling Vex the Dark Siren and says that she definitely focuses into kinetic damage. Now, we do know she has like an action skill augment where she can, well, her trait for her character, she turns her elements of her action skill into whatever elements of the gun that she's holding, but she does have a focus on kinetic damage specifically. And then here, if we go just a little bit further, we can see basically like her 3 skill trees. So we get to the Dead Ringer, Phase Familiar, and Incarnate here. So I believe this is the Eldritch Blast. This is what they show a little bit more. We're going to get into that here in a second. And this is the Trouble pet that we saw a little bit earlier in the 15 minutes trailer. So these two we kind of know a bit about already from the gameplay. This one is going to be new and we're going to see gameplay of it here in just a second. So they show off Dead Ringer a little bit further ahead, about like 15-20 minutes later at the 44 mark. But I want to go over that now just because it's a little bit more on topic. And this is her new ability. It's a charged ability, and you get the choice of like 2 basically type of specters. One is going to be a little bit more like defensive focused, and I think they said lifesteal. And then the other one is going to be more offensive, but the specter itself is going to be a lot squishier. Now, the damage that they show it off doing actually looked pretty decent here. So let's watch it for a second. They're going to call in some of these Reapers here. And as you can see, they actually do like fairly decent damage. The Spectre started shooting, and also we did hear them say that there's going to be a way to basically give these guys a copy of your gear. So it's going to be a lot like Zane Digiclone, I would guess. That way we're going to be able to actually put out probably a ton of damage. It might just be just straight up, you put one of these down, boom, 2x damage. Put another one down, 3x damage. And so on, which could be pretty insane. I would not write these off. I don't know if this is your playstyle, but these do seem very powerful, and especially like we're seeing level 30 gameplay right here. So I think by endgame, all your gear, I think these guys could be pretty strong. So they specifically mention at least 1 class mod, so we'll probably see several options to actually pass your gear over to the Spectrals, which is going to be pretty cool. But now jumping back to more about the characters, talking about Rafa, the Exo Soldier, we found out that he is actually pretty weak, and TDR gave him this exosuit, and the exosuit could like kill him at any time. He could die basically any time, but this is what's making him so powerful, and all his gadgets along with it. They specifically talk about how charming he is. So he definitely gives me that Zane vibe. They have very similar kind of vibes to them, like the soldier kind of tech related. So I definitely see the parallels between those two there, and it wouldn't surprise me if in the story they do have some like special back and forths. But now moving on to the character that I plan on maining when Borderlands 4 comes out is Harlow the Gravatar. They did confirm that she is a member of the Trant family. So if you are a fan of the Trants, you're going to be a fan of Harlow. And they talk about her using basically like the disco ball nuke that we saw in one of the very first gameplay trailers. Just a huge ball that got summoned, got flown down the battlefield, and just a huge explosion. That sold me on Harlow. I was like, I need to play whatever character is doing that. We found out that's Harlow. And then we saw kind of like the phase grasp type thing where enemies got put up into a ball, almost like ties that bind scenario where the damage was distributed. Like one enemy got shot and they all died. So that could be very interesting. And they just kind of show around her doing like different face slam type things with the balls, like throwing enemies into the ground. But then we can move on over to Eamon, the Forge Knight. They talk about him a little bit more in depth, specifically calling him a big beefy daddy, which, I mean, let's be honest, that's just how it is. But that is their words. They specifically talk about him having drones that are forged into his body that he can control to like form this shield and other utility from his kit. And right here we can hear all of the different things that he can use. So let's listen to that real quick.
Got a sword, he's got an axe, he's got a hammer, he's got a shield, he's got a spear, he's got a whip.
This is a long list.
That was a lot of pieces of gear. Shield, hammer, spear, axe. Like there's a lot of different things that he's going to be able to use. So I think he's going to have a lot of versatility and ways he can play. Otherwise, they just kind of go through some other things about Kairos, stuff that we basically already know, and more about like the vehicles that you can summon anywhere. We kind of already known that. But then they go into talking about the compass. There's been a lot of talk about this versus a minimap and such. And with the new like kind of open world system that they're doing, I basically guaranteed that it was some technical reason that they couldn't do it. Like there was going to be some big performance hit having that mini map loaded all the time. So they opted for the compass. But that actually does not seem like the case. I thought that's what Randy was going to explain here. He goes in and talks about it for a little bit. But it definitely seems like it's a design choice, which is a little weird to me. He goes on saying like how expansive the world is. You kind of need that compass to extend to that further lengths. But I think they still need to have both. He didn't say anything about a technical reason. It just purely seemed design reason. They tried saying that it helps you out doing things with verticality. Went and talked about verticality for a while with how this is gonna be the most vertical Borderlands experience that we've had so far, and the compass makes that easier with the arrows and things like that. But I think that is a little disingenuous because Borderlands 3 had a 3D minimap, actual minimap, and that had arrows telling you if things were up and down. I thought Borderlands 3 minimap worked fantastic. I've recently been kind of playing a little bit of Borderlands 3 in my free time, just kind of getting back into the Borderlands world. And I've had no issues with that minimap whatsoever. I think it works perfect. So I really like to see them have both. I think no minimap is a huge misstep. I use it all the time. Like there's so many times in Borderlands that you have no idea when an enemy's spawning right behind you. Enemies do a ton of damage throughout the history of Borderlands. Like you need to know where these enemies are spawning at all times. So I would really, really like to see them add a minimap. This is the way I play most of these games. You're just basically looking at the minimap and then you quickly look back to actually like shoot, make sure you're aiming at the target. Then you're looking right back at the minimap to find your next enemy. And without that, I think it's going to feel very clunky. I think it's very outdated to not have a minimap in a game like Borderlands. So I'd really, really like Gearbox to do both. Then they talked a little bit more about the weapon parts system that is coming with the game. So these are drastically going to change the weapons if you guys are not up to date. Like if you get a Jacob's part, you could now have a, Mallow-on base weapon now ricocheting on crits, things like that, or shooting towards stickies. So there's so many ways to change our loot now, which is going to be crazy. They confirmed that there's no crafting involved with this at all. Like, there's no way to change anything. It's just going to be how they drop. And then they did say that purples are actually going to have the most, like, random parts with this. Legendaries are going to have one less, but that's going to be replaced with, like, that legendary effect. So it seems like the legendary effect is kind of tied to this part now. So that's going to be how the actual, like, loot rarity works. And then we can see that there's actually a few parts that are just part only, like they're not going to be weapons or anything like that. And that's Hyperion, COV, and Atlas. So you can get tracker pucks on things, which could be very interesting if we end up with a way to like tracker puck, Torg sticky with crit ricochets. Like if you can have all three of those on a purple, that could be insane. And they also did confirm that if you get TDR stuff on weapons, any weapon can be thrown, which could be very, very interesting because TDR throws have been very powerful in the past. After that, they moved on over to talking about enhancements a little bit more. We kind of knew how these worked for the most part. They're just basically replacing the artifact system from Borderlands 3, and they're going to be boosting weapons with a certain part. So if something has, like, for example, here in this picture, Ripper license parts. If your Malawan weapon has just one Ripper part on it, it's going to benefit from this enhancement. So it is going to be like kind of narrowing the options a little bit, but it's not too bad. It's not like it has to be a Ripper weapon, just needs a Ripper part on it to gain this bonus. And then they also briefly talked about the basically set bonus system here at the bottom. And this is going to be a new endgame system. And they didn't really explain too much more else about it, except for that it's called firmware. And it's going to be just, a set bonus system here on the enhancements. And we're going to find a little bit more about it later, I'm assuming, when they talk more about Endgame. On the panel, they also talked a little bit more about Ordnance. This is basically replacing launchers and grenades within the game. It's now going to be on a cooldown system. And they talked specifically about like throwing nukes, which is pretty crazy. They seemed like in the past, they were talking about how they had to tone down the damage of like grenades and stuff of that nature, just because you could spam them all the time with the amount of like grenade ammo you could get through different ways. So now with this way, they have this cooldown system. So you're still going to be able to build into it, but it's a little bit easier for them to balance, according to them. But one of the biggest things that they revealed is that shields, there's also going to be a new type called armor, which they said is going to focus more specifically into the offensive side. And you could be, killing enemies and getting shield back. And that way you can just keep pushing and stay on that offensive. So I'm very curious to see how this new armor shield ends up working. They also specifically talked about the skill trees and the build diversity that they're hoping to have. And they essentially talked about how each one of these three new like paths within one action skill. So they called this like the trunk and the branches, I believe, are the terms that they use. But essentially, what they wanted their goal to be is even if people built straight into the same action skill, like say the green action skill here on Vex, if somebody built into the right tree and somebody built into the left tree, they would still have drastically different functioning builds. So that could be very huge for build crafting and the diversity throughout the game. If, just the difference between these two is that large that they're almost unrecognizable builds to each other, could be really, really awesome and great for the longevity of the game. I'm very excited to see how that actually plays out and just exactly how different builds can end up being within Borderlands 4. Now, one of the biggest questions that we finally got answered and confirmation on is dedicated loot drops at launch, and they have them. So certain bosses are going to have certain drops tied to them, which is really, really nice. Every Borderlands game needs this, and I'm really glad that they have listened with that and know after like Wonderlands that this is something that these games need to have. So that's a huge, huge plus for Borderlands 4. Randy also went in depth more on the co-op system and how you can just drop in and out at any time, up to 4 players. You get dynamic level scaling and individual difficulty. So he mentioned like hard and harder difficulty. So we're getting probably at least 3, I would assume 4 difficulties. I would imagine like easy, normal, hard, and harder. I don't know what the actual difference of those are going to be, but that would be my guess on like 4 difficulties. Each player can have their own set. It's not going to matter. And, he was talking about playing with his wife, and his wife being like level 20. He could just jump in when he finally gets a chance to play at level 1 and be perfectly fine wherever she's at in the game. He'll be facing, level 1 balanced enemies. She'll be facing level 20. So that's really cool. If you're looking to play with people who can't always play at the same time, it's not going to hurt you, and you can always jump in with each other. Instance loot for each player. That's something we're pretty used to at this point in Borderlands. So everybody's going to have their own loot. You don't have to worry about your loot goblin friends always stealing the legendaries when they drop. You're going to have crossplay at launch. You can instantly fast travel to friends within your game, which is really nice. He did say instantly, so that could be really nice. There's no load times, anything like that. And also, they talked a little bit more about the lobby redesign and other quality of life improvements. So that's looking really good for Borderlands co-op. That's something I've said for many years now that they really needed to work on. Is Borderlands is always advertised as a co-op game, but you always felt punished for playing co-op. Hopefully that is now not the case. It ends up working really smooth. Hopefully the actual like connection within the game works as well, because that was a big problem in Borderlands 3. Anytime I did like co-op stuff with viewers on stream or any sort of like random match made things, almost always got disconnected. It was pretty bad. So hopefully that was improved as well. Now, at the very end of the stream, they were also talking about the loot rarity, and they were talking about how legendary is going to be the highest rarity. But Randy also seemed to be trolling, but also, hey, there's a small chance that he wasn't trolling. And he started to say legendary, and then he was like talking about pearlescence. I personally think he was trolling, but maybe at some endgame activity there could be a secret pearl, but we won't know until the game comes out. But that is something worth noting, that Randy was kind of hinting and trolling at pearlescence. There's also going to be hands-on Borderlands 4 events here coming this summer, specifically in June. Randy mentioned streamers going out and playing the game. So, hey, Gearbox 2K, if you want to send your boy out there, I would love to share Borderlands 4 with everybody. So, thank you. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, that would be something exciting to look forward to. We're going to find probably a ton more about the game. They also talked about going on a press tour here and talking about endgame things. So we have a lot of Borderlands 4 news coming, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Overall, the PAX panel went very well. There was a lot of good things. Really, the only negative that I can think of is that minimap compass situation and it being a design choice and not really limited to technical. So that's really the main thing I want to see them change. That, maybe some like UI tweaks, but the UI tweaks is not really a big deal. Probably pretty easy to do, but that minimap is definitely something that they need to get on before launch, or at least add shortly after launch. I think that would help out the sentiment with the game a ton and make the game feel way better. But yeah, that was the PAX panel. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you learned something new. I'll have the whole thing linked below. I did kind of skip over some like areas that we kind of knew about already, so I highly recommend you guys watch the whole thing. But this is kind of just, everything that you need to know from it. But thank you all for watching this far. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.